ahead and get started. Good morning again, everyone, and thank you for joining this session on climate resilient agriculture and the launch of some practical tools and resources for implementers. Before we get started, we want to let you know that we will be providing French interpretation during this session. So please click on the globe marked interpretation at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language, whether English or French. Please note that we will have a presentation in French, so you must select your language one way or the other in order to hear everything. And also, please note that this event will be recorded. And if you have any technical issues during the session, please let us know and we can help. My name is Jennifer Mayer, and I'm the Climate Resilient Agriculture and NRM Advisor on the PRO-WASH SCALE Award, which is a learning award funded by USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance that supports capacity strengthening and research for BHA implementing partners around the world. We focus on the sectors of agriculture, natural resources, livelihoods, and WASH. This morning's session we'll start with an overview of the new tools at our disposal around climate resilient agriculture, followed by an example of using these tools in the DRC. Then we'll hear about some next steps you can take to incorporate these approaches into your climate resilient agriculture programming, as well as some reflections from a participant at a recent RD training. We'll pause for Q&A towards the end, so please use the Q&A box to pose your questions for the presenters, or you can just drop them in the chat, whatever is easiest for you. And then I'd just like to introduce today's presenters. We have Lauren Pincus, who's a consultant for PRO-WASH SCALE and Resilience Agriculture. Idoskeet Itambwe, the Livelihoods Team Leader for the FSP and Nyanya Resilience Food Security Activity in DRC. And then joining us a bit later will be Masasa Makwasa from WFP's regional office in Tanzania. So now I'll turn it over to Lauren to start us off.
Hi, everybody. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. Next slide, please, Bella. I'll be kicking us off with resource launch. Those of you who were with us for the first webinar know that we are focusing on 2 climate resilient agriculture approaches in this webinar, Permagarden approach and resilience design, both developed under the SCALE Award. As a quick review for those of us who weren't with us during the first webinar, the Permagarden approach was developed as a response to the typical challenges faced by many home garden projects. It focuses on water management and building healthy soils using local resources and a strong emphasis on strengthening local capacity. It uses a design process, which is a little bit unique, to create a design that's specific to each site. And that really helps smallholders make efficient use of all their available resources to ensure that there's consistent production all year round, even in a small space. Next slide. Our other approach that we'll be talking about is resilience design, or also known as RD. RD expands beyond the vegetable garden to the whole compound. And the goal is to restore household level or community level landscapes by stabilizing the hydrology and bringing back biodiversity. RD sites work to build food forests that can provide year-round nutrition, and they also work to mitigate the impact of droughts and floods across the landscape. Next slide, please. I would just like to take a minute here to thank the team that's responsible for creating the resources that we're about to hear about. And as organizations have approached SCALE to trial the approaches and worked with SCALE to trial RD and Permagarden through their programs, these teams have identified a few resources that could help them better incorporate these approaches into their existing programs. And this PRO-WASH SCALE team that you see here, along with several consultants, including myself, have been working with these teams to develop new guidance documents and resources that could take teams all the way from proposal writing through implementation and project management and monitoring and evaluation. So in this session, I'm going to introduce you to some of these new resources and explain how teams can use them. Next slide. First of all of the resources that I am discussing today can be found on the FSN network here at this link. We've set up special pages devoted to resilience agriculture and Permagarden that contains everything that you'll see here. Next slide. This table here is a list of some of the resources grouped according to project phase. So some of the materials here are Permagarden specific, some focus on resilience design, and others could be used for either approach. I'm going to first walk through some of the resources listed under implementation, which are the technical documents that teams can use to further their understanding of these two approaches. Next slide. So we have two fairly extensive tools that teams can use to build their technical skills, the Permagarden Technical Manual and the Permagarden Foundations course, which is an e-course available online. The Permagarden Technical Manual was recently released and the e-course was released in December 2022, and both are available in English and in French. Next slide. Starting first with the e-course, the Permagarden Foundations course, you will see that it consists of 9 video modules. These are the first 2, which are about 7 to 15 minutes long. These first videos introduce users to the concept of a permagarden and why it is used, and how it can strengthen household resilience. Next slide. The next videos then explain some of the key water, soil, and biodiversity principles that are used to construct a good permagarden. Next slide. And then the last 4 videos really dig into how users can conduct the community level trainings to build permagardens. Permagardens are often first built with a community-led demonstration plot, and then farmers are encouraged to take those techniques back to their own field. So these videos show you step by step the trainings that can be done with communities. Next slide. The videos contain animations that help demonstrate concepts that are hard to grasp with still images or pictures. And all of these videos can be done as part of a small group or as individuals, and all contain some suggested homework or additional reading. Next slide. We also have the Permagarden Technical Manual, which is an updated version of the one released in 2017 under the TOPS Award. And this new version focuses more on how to use a whole compound approach instead of just creating a small garden site, and how to use minimum standards that have been developed in recent years so that the soil, water, biodiversity, and protection elements of a permagarden are thoroughly in place. This technical manual also focuses on how to apply these techniques under an emergency context. The manual is organized much the same as the course, in that it starts with some discussion on what a permagarden is, and then moves into some of the technical content. There in the middle, section 2 on water, soil, biodiversity, finishing with how team members can work with communities to develop demonstration gardens and do trainings, including how they can use the minimum standards checklist, both as a training tool and as a monitoring and an evaluation tool. Next slide, please. So here I'll show you the minimum standards checklist, and we will hear more about its practical application from our second speaker, Ido Skid. So like I said, these checklists were developed to ensure that the soil and other agronomic principles that are essential to a functional and high-yielding permagarden or RD site are in place. So this gives gardens the best possible chance to be successful for smallholders. There are separate checklists there you can see on the left-hand side for both approaches, but they do function the same. Each checklist breaks up the permagarden or RD site into 5 essential elements, and asks users to observe how well each of these elements were implemented. Scoring criteria are available to help the user with their evaluation. Typically, a staff member who understands the permagarden approach or RD would accompany the farmer to the field and walks through the checklist with the farmer. So this is an opportunity for farmers to evaluate their own work and what could be done to improve the site, and an opportunity for a staff member to capture really important information about the program quality. So the farmer and the staff member then give each element of the site quality ranking. You can see the check minus, the check, and the check plus, and the star at the bottom there. And those can be turned into a numerical ranking for an M&E team if needed. And for program management purposes, teams can use the checklist to see if there is a particular element, like water, that is receiving lower scores throughout the program, and they might need to do more training around that topic, or if particular farmers are struggling more than other farmers and they need to modify their training in a different way. Next slide, please. We have one more technical document, the Resilience Design Facilitators Guide, which is available to assist teams who are conducting an RD training with community members. The manual is meant to go to the field with trainers. It contains a step-by-step instruction for how to work with community members to implement RD. The manual is meant for a trainer who has already familiarized themselves with the concept of RD, ideally through an in-person training. However, new trainers can consult the Permagarden Technical Manual or the e-course to familiarize themselves with key technical principles if they want. The RD Facilitator's Guide contains 6 suggested sessions. Each session outline thoroughly explains what happens in each session. You can see in that D1 box, that's an example of a session, including how the facilitators should prepare in advance, what they need to bring to each training, what they need to have prepared at the site already, and it then walks through step by step what the facilitator will do for the discussion topics and the activities that happen in that session. The front part of the manual, that blue box on the right, that can be used as a sort of cheat sheet for facilitators who have conducted a few trainings already and simply need to remember the flow and sequence of events. Next slide. And last, we've developed a few additional resources to help teams more fully integrate Permagarden and resilience approaches into their programs. The Permagarden proposal tip sheet on the left, it provides a lot of good practical information for program teams when designing and training for Permagardens in their programs. And the Determining the Success of Your Permagarden document contains monitoring and evaluation strategies, including a survey tool and an interview guide. So all of these resources were developed in response to partner demand and in collaboration with them. And so we ask you right now, if you or your team are implementing RD or Permagarden approach and you have resource needs or ideas, please let us know. You can use the chat or you can email us at an email address that is being posted in the chat right now. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that, Lauren. That was a great kind of overview of everything that's out there in terms of tools and resources to help practitioners implement these approaches. I'm going to now hand it over to Itoski, who his experiences in applying these tools in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Itoski, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are. I would like to talk to you about how our FSP project was able to use these checklists to improve the quality of permagardens that were created in communities in 3 health areas, and how we were able to do this in South Kivu province. Next slide, please. Yes. The FSP program is a 7-year program which began in October 2016 and ended in September 2023. The goal of this, well, there are 3 goals of this project: to develop agriculture and market systems health, nutrition, and WASH, and also local governments. Those were the three purposes of the project. And with a few cross-cutting goals, such as social and behavior change, gender, and youth, we were able to work with 51,660 households in the project area, in the Miti Moresa and Katana health areas, as well as the Kalehe health area. In terms of our Permagarden activities, we pursued them in an integrated fashion under our agriculture and market systems purpose, and working specifically on markets and nutrition. Participants participated in these activities. They were members of care groups, and they were already direct participants under the health, nutrition, and WASH purpose as part of these care groups. We were hoping to work with them practically on improving livelihoods with these participants. For FSP, Permagarden activities were used to help improve the nutrition levels of pregnant and nursing women, as well as children under 5. Yes, here we are on the next slide. So while implementing these activities, we broke it down into 2 phases. First, we started by identifying households and members of care groups through mother leaders. They were responsible for supporting the women target populations we were looking at. And they were sharing seeds for cabbages, carrots, and other crops, so that these mothers who were part of the groups who received direct training were then able to share that knowledge with neighboring households. Sometimes it was complicated because we realized after our post-distribution monitoring visits that almost all the permagardens, none of them were the same. And so we started reflecting on how we could improve the quality of these permagardens in our project area. That is why we worked with the SCALE team to develop a permagarden checklist based on criteria that I will discuss further later in this presentation. So as part of the activity, we were able to create around 23,917 permagardens as part of the project directly. But after we developed the model and the PSP model as part of the Permagarden initiative and making contacts with farmers, we were able to encourage local communities so the seeds coming from the program were mixed with traditional, very nutritional varieties. And so we were able to aid in the creation of spontaneous permagardens. So around 4,679 spontaneous permagardens also popped up during the final 8 quarters of our program. Next slide, please. As you can see here, we developed our checklists based on various known techniques that from modeling agriculture resiliency, we were based on the three foundations of resilience modeling: water management, soil management, sustainable soil management, and also managing biodiversity. Here you only have a sample of the checklist, but we settled on 25 criteria all of which cover those three pillars I just mentioned. For example, when it comes to soil management, one of our criteria for evaluating permagarden quality is has the soil become enriched? Is there a double layer in the soil? And have contour ditches been dug to collect water? And how is water distributed throughout the permagarden? Then when it comes to biodiversity in the permagardens, we were looking for, are there several varieties of crops planted in the garden? And based on the score from these checklists, we could evaluate the quality. If you had between 2 and 12 species, that was a score of 4. If you had more than 13, you could get a score of 5. And if you have a permagarden that only has 1 or 2 varieties, that only had a score of 1 for low biodiversity. Next slide, please. Here, you can see that the checklist I showed you is just an example, which we then translated into local languages, into Swahili, and we were able to translate documents about permagardens to give access to the local communities so that they could see if the permagarden is something that would meet their needs. So we were able to put these documents out in the community, and they were able to monitor the quality of their permagardens by themselves. But how did we collect data? It was program staff who did data collection, and they looked at them by health zone by month, and we did quarterly analyses within the program. We did monitoring and evaluation, or it was the monitoring and evaluation department that put this data into a dashboard for analysis. And we shared the results with Permagarden extension agents and worked on action plans when we identified which criteria were not being met in each health zone. Next slide, please. Here, here are some screen captures of the dashboard that we made. And you can see we use color for the analysis, and each color represents the score for each criteria. The interpreter is sorry, the connection is not very good. So here you see the difference between where activities are planned and what the quality is like in different areas. Where you have a very dark blue, that's a score of 4, so productive capacity is in place. And where you see purple, that's a score of 5. And that is a practice that is very productive and high quality. So that is how we use this dashboard to analyze the data that was coming in. And if you look closely, you will see that in the dashboard for year 4, you have a lot more green. A lot more green than you have light blue, dark blue, or even purple. And when you see the dashboard for year 5, it's the same province, it's the same zone, but you have darker colors showing that they were able to do a lot more and able to start improving quality. I'm sorry, it seems we have lost the connection completely.
Thank you so much.
Oh no.
He's
So
back.
yes, so there you go. That's what it is. I'm sorry, I'm having some connection issues, but I am here. Next slide, please. We also conducted several studies to try to see what the results of our Permagarden activities were. And as you can see here, 99% of participants I'm sorry, I've lost sound again.
Skeet, are you able to? It seems we've lost your audio. Let's give it a minute and see if he's able to connect. Does it seem he may have dropped off, actually? Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm having some connection problems here, but I'm back. So there were 99% of households who said that they improved the nutrition of their children. And thanks to the permagardens, they were able to save money and to invest more. And there was also the social impact of the permagardens. Next slide, please. Yes, in terms of lessons learned, all of the household members were involved, even men, in permagarden activities. Some households preferred using local seeds to improve or increase the resources available in their permagarden. But the most important thing was the use of the Permagarden checklist tool. That really helped improve the quality of our gardens. And I would like to take about a minute to explain that here, because by using the Permagarden checklists, the field agents, the field assistants, were not only able to evaluate quality, but it was also useful for extension agents. So with these tools, we were able to make all of the permagardens, we were able to create more in line and have them be more in line with our project goals from the beginning. So this tool really helped us to improve the quality of our permagardens. However, there were some challenges, such as a limited access to water. That was a big problem for some households. And in terms of successes, there were participants who improved their nutritional level after adopting permagardens. And it wasn't just our participants who created permagardens. With support from Permagarden extension agents, as using their private service provider model, it was able to spread further in the community. Thank you very much.
I love that last slide. Thank you, Ituski, for those excellent insights. So interesting. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, but we'll have time during Q&A. We can hear from you on those questions. And now I'll hand it back to Lauren, who's going to take us through some upcoming learning opportunities. Lauren, over to you.
Great, thanks, Jen. Yes, as we've seen, we do have all these great technical guidance and training tools. Next slide, Bella. We have all these great technical guidance materials and training tools that have just been developed and with the support of teams like Ituskits. But how do we go from reading about those tools to a successful garden? There's a lot in the middle. And even more than that, how do we go from these materials to a successful program that is able to increase the climate resilience of smallholders? One piece of feedback that we've received from programs is the importance of a well-trained facilitator who can work directly with farmers and program staff and managers who also understand how to implement a permagarden or an RD project. So becoming familiar with these techniques does take a combination of reading, but also reflection and discussion and hands-on experience above all else. And so these new resources can get people started, but it will take more for teams to get fully operational, especially for teams who are new to initiating climate resilient agriculture activities. Next slide, Bella. So to that end, PWS will be hosting some facilitated hybrid training opportunities, which means that there's a combination of remote and potential in-person activities in the near future to help organizations take full advantage of the new materials and energy around this topic. So this opportunity is most appropriate for agricultural technical advisors or team leads who are currently working on food security and nutrition or related programs. Interested in organizations can sign up their team members in a sign-up sheet that is going to be circulating in the next couple months through our newsletter. Sign-ups are available for both BHA and non-BHA funded organizations. And interested individuals can join with a supervisor support as well. Organizations can also sign up multiple people if they would like, so that smaller groups can work together within an organization. And depending on interest, there is also the option to conduct a facilitated learning group in both English or French. Next slide. So how will this work exactly? There will be a group facilitator who will send around a suggested schedule for watching videos in the e-course, and then participants will watch the videos on their own time. There will also be other work, essentially from the manual and the other tools that have been developed that are also be suggested in a sequenced fashion. The cohort will then be connected through virtual platforms like a WhatsApp or a Google Doc. And then there will be group meetings over Zoom held approximately every 2 months so that members can share their reflections after watching the assigned videos and reading the suggested material. The meetings will also be an opportunity for members to ask questions to various experts and other group members. Some of the sessions will be focused on reviewing the technical content, and others will be focused on the nuts and bolts of actually implementing these two climate resilient approaches as part of a program. Next slide. So there could also be, depending on interest and availability of group members, there could also be in-person trainings. And these could be arranged at various field sites and will be used to further solidify learning about the different approaches. So in-person trainings will allow group members to build an RD site together. We often build a demonstration garden, which is then handed over to the host farmer, or even potentially visiting farmers who have existing RD sites to see how established sites look and how they feel and how they function, and talk to the farmers who built them. Next slide, please. So we hope that a facilitated learning opportunity like this provides future trainers and program implementers with the skills they will need in order to build new climate resilient approaches into their programming. We know that learning about these approaches is a long-term endeavor that takes a lot of time and effort, but as we've seen from the presentations given in webinar 1, they can be very effective techniques to build climate resilience of smallholders in a multitude of environments. And so participating in a facilitated learning activity such as this is a great way for organizations to get started using these approaches, become familiar with the new tools and how to use them. And we do hope you join us and start to incorporate more of these techniques into your programming. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. That's really great. And I'm excited for these opportunities coming up next year to engage a little bit more deeply with program teams around these approaches. We're going to pause here because we have a really great opportunity to hear directly from someone who recently attended an RD training in Uganda. And we've got Warren Brush, who's one of the facilitators of that training, and Masasa Makwasa, who's from WFP's regional office in Tanzania, who attended the training. And Warren, I think you had some questions for Masasa. I think Masasa is on the call, isn't it?
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, I am, yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So next slide, please. I just to give an overview, and then I'm going to ask a few questions of Masasa. So we, a couple of us who have been involved with TOPS and SCALE, which helped to develop the RD approach, have had a lot of requests from different organizations outside of BHA to take the RD approach into their work. We have just developed a training center in a refugee settlement in northern Uganda in partnership with African Women Rising. And it's a Patagonia-funded training center and demonstration site and research site that we have started to run these resilience design 2-week trainings that incorporate both the Permagarden and the larger farm and even beyond that scale training for people from all different agencies and different programs. So we had in our first one this last month, we had over 16 organizations from 9 countries, including the UN, the IOM, WFP, NRC, Danish Church Aid, CARE, USAID, NASA. We had people from all over the world joining us on this. And we have 2 courses next year that we're doing, one in February and one in October, and we'll put a link in the chat box for that. But we wanted to ask Masasa Makwasa is one of the participants that was in our inaugural course, and he is someone that has immense experience in project management, over 17 years of experience across multiple countries, and facilitating public and private business startups and growth. He has experience in agricultural marketing and has worked with smallholder farmers to support in Tanzania and beyond for the last 15 years. He's currently a manager with the UN's World Food Program in Tanzania. And so Masasa, thank you for joining us. It was amazing to be out there with you in northern Uganda and for you to take the 2 weeks to join us. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One is, what was your impression of our of resilience design before participating in the training that we did together there at a place called Loch Neno?
Yeah, actually, for me, do you hear me first of all before I proceed? Okay, perfect. So my impression before on the resilience design, for me, actually, from the sector before attending the training, I think it was more on climate smart agriculture. That was the perception around. So when he attended the Loch Neno training, I came to realize it's beyond than that. So maybe climate smart agriculture is just an element, part of the concept within the broader concept of regenerative design in agriculture.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And I would love to hear also from you, what was the most impactful part of the training for you then?
Yeah, for me, I think it was plant the lane before you plant the plant. I think that was critical because, you know, as the smallholder farmers in Africa in general, their critical challenge is actually the rain, the water. You know, you cannot really, you can have all the knowledge, all the skills, all the tools to farm. But if you don't have water resource, it's nothing. You cannot do anything. So for me, on the regenerative design, the key aspect I took the most, which is impactful, is really to plant the lane. And then all the other aspects will follow, because if you have the water resources, anything you will grow, and yeah, it will become resilient to that particular farm or household. Thank you.
Wonderful, Masasa. I love if everybody could look at the pictures that are on this slide, you'll see Masasa is actually working to plant the rain physically there. So this course is a mix of theory and practicum. And so we don't just sit in a hotel room or in a training classroom and talk about what we do. We do a little bit of that, but then we take it into the community, we engage the community, we work side by side with the community. So here, Masasa, being a manager with the World Food Program, is working side by side with community members to plant the rain with the djembe out there. So after going through this program, Masasa, how do you think you'll apply what you learned from this training at your work now?
Let me start with the personal, then I'll come to my organization. As a person, I think is the change of mind. And this really reflects the Loch Neno word, which is changing the mindset. So I like even the center to adapt that Loch Neno, which means change the mindset. So first, personal is to change the mindset, because I think the way we were organizing, as I said with my bio, you see I've been a lot working around supporting the value chain business setup. But in the context of agriculture, I think most of our intervention were more on theory part. Like I can say 95%, and the rest is 5%. But with this regenerative design agriculture, now it is really changing. And you can say like a huge mindset change, but also programmatic change, whereby 80% is more on practical, making, doing, to really affect the impact of the community. And with the program 2 weeks, actually 70–80% was actual practical work doing with the community. And you can see the change even within 2 weeks, which we had with the community. Like we left the community with food, with the best practice, which they can still doing, even if we don't go there within 2 years, but we can still see the impact. So I think for me, that is a starting point to apply even within the organization. For Tanzania, we already have the plan. So actually we are building on the existing plan, program, so that we can start changing our training design. So to adapt this regenerative design in our training work with the community. And actually we have already planned from January next year to start applying those skills learned at the Lake Neno Center in Uganda. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Masasa. And we've just come to the end of our time, but I want to thank you for sharing your perspective and joining us today. I know you have a full and busy schedule. And if you notice that there is a link that was dropped into the chat of how to find out more about these trainings at Lake Neno, so you too can come and change your mindset. Thank you.
That is wonderful. Thank you both for this. It's so useful to have like immediate feedback and reactions from people who've been through the training. So it's massively valuable. Thank you, Masasa, and thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
So we just have a few minutes left, but we've got about 10 minutes for some Q&A. I saw there was a question from Carl about the development of the checklist, which I'd like Itoski to chime in on, but because we also have Keith Poe in the audience right now, we wanted to kick things off with some reflections from Keith, who's joining us from USAID. Keith, I'm just curious, how do you think the RD approach might address some of the challenges that you're seeing as a USAID representative, especially out in the field, and especially related to climate resilience?
Thank you. It's a very complex question in 2 minutes to answer. So yes, the background for me is that I'm a firm believer in everything that we've been discussing. I've done it in my own backyard, in my own farm. I've done it in Nicaragua, in the driest parts of the region up north, where there's rocks and there's not a lot of rain. And we've done biointensive, or the work that I used to do in Nicaragua was with biointensive farming, regenerative agroforestry. And I think to be truly, speaking from my own heart, it's a lot harder than it looks like. It's a lot of work up front. It's a lot of the changing of the mindset that Masasa was talking about. It's a lot of the digging in the dirt, literally. It's knowing your land, which if you are a permanent farmer in the land that you live on, it's somewhat easy enough, but you have to change the way you look at your land. You need to know your knowledge of your local seeds, your open pollinated varieties of seeds that you have access to. And it is really a lot of work, harvesting the water and planting the rain. The beauty I see is that there are many potential opportunities, but it's not easy. And I think that even though there are manuals and there are guides, there's not a one size fits all. We need to give the guidelines to folks. Farmers need to understand the principles, and then farmers need to be allowed to innovate in their own backyards. So that's me speaking from myself, my own experience. Thank you.
That's super helpful, and I think it really resonates with me as well. And it kind of makes me think of kind of related to Carl's earlier question in the chat. When Itoski was presenting, he asked, were farmers integrated in the development of these criteria? And I think that's really relevant to the points Keith was just making. Itoski, I know Warren responded in the chat with his perspective, and I'm happy to have Warren chime in again, but maybe Itoski, if you have some thoughts about the process that was used to develop the checklists along with the farmers, maybe you can speak to that. If he's still with us, he may have dropped off.
Are we?
Oh, okay, Ale.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Warren, for giving the answer that you did earlier in the chat. Well, when we developed these criteria, it was a really participatory process. We worked with farmers because in all of the trainings that we organized, we always started with the question, what is a good permagarden? What are the techniques that you have to use for it to be a permagarden, for it to be permaculture? So we started with that. And when we were developing the checklists, we went back to our participants and we shared our drafts of the checklists in Swahili in their local language so that they could understand what was going on. And we even put the criteria down in Swahili. So when there was a technique that worked well, we could note down, okay, this is a good technique, this is working, and we could show the participants, show the farmers how they could use that to evaluate their own gardens. All of that we did directly with the farmers. And also it was made easier because of our proximity. There were the Permagarden extension agents who were always present in the community. And some of the resources that were an important resource that we left in these communities after the end of the project. So they were going into households asking to see the Permagarden, and they would have a copy of the checklist with them. And I would ask them, what are the techniques that are working? What are the techniques that aren't working? And the members of the household could say, yes, I can see that my water collection system, my rain collection system isn't working as intended when I installed it, but that's the technique that I'm working on. I'm doing some more work on that. So the extension agents were able to work with the communities to make sure that they were taking ownership of these tools and for making sure that we were getting feedback from them about the tools and the techniques they were using. Thank you.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Itaski. I have time for one or so more questions, and one of them that's percolating for me is around sort of like if there's a team that's interested in incorporating these approaches into their programs, where might they start? And I know, Warren, you had made some comments in our preparation for today about how we share RD, the overall approach, and the ways that it can be scaled from Permagarden to RD, starting small. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that in terms of helping teams get a start with this?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting aspects of resilience design is that it's so community engagement oriented, and like Itoski was saying, it is really important that it's a collaboration with the wisdom in the community. And so whenever we talk about changing the mindset, we talk about the three most important ways to do that. Is demonstration is the first one. The second most important way to do that is demonstration, and the third and most important part of changing a mindset is demonstration. So a lot of our programming is based on building demonstration sites. So even throughout the cascade, that's something that we're doing. And starting at the smallest scale helps us to understand how to do it. Like Keith was saying, that there's a lot to learn, and there's work to do, but starting at a small scale allows you to understand it, so then you could take it out into your farm. So often we start at a homestead and then move into the farm. And I'll stop there in case there's other questions.
That's really useful. Does anybody, I think I would like to just flag, since we only have a few minutes left, I'm emptying this, but please take a few moments to survey. We both have English and French versions. And the reason it's so important, not only for us to improve future events, but because there are these questions, and because we intend to continue offering webinars and learning opportunities around these approaches into next year, we'd really love to hear your thoughts and ideas for the best way to carry this conversation forward, priority topics or areas of challenge, and including any related topics of interest. So you can include those in your survey responses, and we wanted to make sure that you had plenty of time, even before we finish today's webinar, so that you can get started, and please do respond to those surveys. Is there a raised hand somewhere? Sorry.
Yeah, it's me, Jen.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know where the raise hand button is on.
Oh, got
Zoom.
it. Go for it.
Just a question, because, you know, my worry, and I've expressed this to, I think, PWS before, but my worry with criteria is they start to become canonical. You know, farmers must do it. It becomes like the 10 Commandments. And I want to know what is, and also when I hear mindset change, it starts to, I've heard mindset change for 20 years, and it's usually someone who's not living by the sweat of their brow, telling someone who is to change their mindset. So I want to know what sort of engagement do you have to get feedback from farmers and also learn from farmers? Because that's where I always get a little worried with some of these, is it stops being a flexible tool and it becomes a straitjacket. So where is that flexibility where you're learning back from farmers and adapting your practices? Not at the startup where you're doing an evaluation, but during the implementation. Thank you.
That's definitely baked in. I see Warren's off camera. Do you want, or on camera? Do you want to take that quickly? We're just at the end of
No,
time.
that's so great, Carl. Thank you. I also am a farmer using the same practices as well. But one of the things I think is really important is that we are constantly doing feedback loops with the farming community. We start the process by listening to their issues that are going on. We have a process we call the story of place, and understanding the wisdom that's in the community and integrating that into the process of resilience design being applied. So a lot of the people that we're working with are working in degraded landscapes and don't have traditional tools to deal with degradation. So a lot of their traditional farming practices are set up for a system that hasn't been incredibly erosive. So what we do is we bring the processes that we have developed that reverse degradation, and we work with their community wisdom to be able to develop something that's unique and site context specific and community specific to the families and farmers that we're working with. And then we have our monitoring process we call hoe in hand monitoring, where when we go back out to the community, we're bringing our hoe with us and we're actually doing work together, seeing what's working. We're taking innovations from farmers and then sharing that back across to other people we're working with. And I know we're out of time, but I wanted to just address that because it's a great question. And it is so important that we're not coming in and saying, hey, let's, you know, this is what you need to do, because that's not what RD is about. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Warren. We can stay on for a couple of minutes if people can't want to. I see we have a hand raised by Eric. But just to say, if people need to drop, that's okay. I want to say thanks to all of our presenters and all of you for being here with us today and your contributions. Please stay in touch, sign up for our newsletter, visit our webpage, and reach out to us via email, and hope to see the rest of you in the new year. Eric, did you have a question? We're happy to stay on a little bit later.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Eric, first of all, from Rwanda. I work with UNHCR in livelihood and economic inclusion. So I'm very happy for this group, and then also to learn from colleagues across the world. And also we are implementing climate smart agriculture, which brings this climate resilience agriculture. So this is a good, it's kind of comment, it's not a question, sorry to mention it. It's a good approach, which is helping the restoration of environment which has been deteriorated, and also give hope. As my colleague said, most of the farmers, they are depending on weather which is fluctuating sometimes. And also in this East Africa, there has been we have been experienced with the drought. So I may say this resilient agriculture is good, and then is giving the positive feedback. But we really need to have what I can say the whole society approach, so that we learn from each other, and then also we implement in the way we learn from each other. So my intention as well is to have a collaboration with the colleagues who are in this group, so that where we are implementing, you can see, okay, I meet with this challenge, who can I consult in this way? Which technique, which approach is relevant in this situation? As we are in emergency situations, sometimes we need these expertise, and then from different with different backgrounds. Maybe in West Africa, they have some approaches. In East Africa, they have some approaches. In Europe, wherever, so that we can interact each other, and then we learn from them, and then they learn from us, as our climate is different. That's my comment. Over to you. Thank you.
That's so great. Yes, thank you, Eric. Those are incredibly important points. I think that's why we're so keen to assemble this cohort to learn together on Permagardens starting next year that Lauren mentioned, because of that important element of sharing experiences and challenges within the group and learning from each other. And also, I should highlight that this third edition of the Permagarden manual that we're just launching now, one of the main revisions or additions that we made to the manual was specific to your point about operating in emergency contexts. So there's now a whole section relevant to implementing Permagarden approach in emergency contexts as well. So we hear you. We're seeking to kind of grapple with them together as well. Mallory, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. I think this is a question for Warren. In terms, because I was looking on the site and I saw some photos of you using the A-frame. And I'm assuming it was to either plant on contour lines or to create contour lines for the water issues. And I was just wondering if you had any feedback that you got from the farmers that you were doing that with. I was just in northern Mozambique and doing similar trainings with the A-frames. And it was interesting, just this feedback, because they were used to people coming in and telling them that they really needed to plant in rows, right? That is what we have been telling people. And now we're talking about the contour lines and planting on those in terms of the water issues. And I was just wondering if you had any experience with that, and how you kind of, switched the mindset to maybe a not so linear farm.
That's a great question, Mallory. It's interesting, Masasa addressed this as well, as this idea of planting the rain. And so when we are starting the community engagement process, we first come in and we hear the story of what's going on, what was it like traditionally there on that site. So if we're in a refugee camp, we're also hearing from the host community. And then we start by doing a very small demonstration that is 1 square meter, where we take a square meter and we do what a traditional farmer might do, which is the straight lines, but again, only on 1 square meter. And we literally, do lines that don't work with the slope of the land. And we do some light digging, we put some seeds, maybe some mochum or the manure along that. And then we do right next to that a square meter where we do, with a tiny little A-frame, just as an example, how we can work with the slope to actually change our planting rows, to do some structures that can hold the rain and slow it, spread it, and sink it. So really planting the rain. And then what we do is we have the same amount of water, and we mimic a rainfall on both plots of land, and we just let the community watch what is going on. And what they see is that the conventional approach is so often losing the resources. The rain is actually stealing their nutrient. It's actually causing erosion, and it flows down and away from the land. And they, you know, the farmers are all like, yes, that's what happens. You know, this is this erosion. And then we do look at the improved system, and what they see is that nothing flowed off of it. The nutrients had stayed, the water was concentrated. And throughout the day, as the sun is shining, we go back to that square meter and we look, and there's still water in there where the other one is now dry and crusty. And we ask them, which farm do you want? Do you want the one with the improvements or the conventional? And every single time they say, yes, we want the improved one. And that's the motivation for them to say, okay, I want to learn how to plant the rain so that my plants have a condition that is conducive for life and for good production. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I for some reason didn't think about doing a demo. It kind of all was starting very, very off the cuff of this kind of hub, and I happened to be there with this knowledge. And we were lucky to get some rains to show them, but it was just really fun because we had several days. It was about 10 days of working together. So we eventually had it, but I didn't think about starting with the square meter because we're working with about a half a hectare. And then, yeah, so thank you. That makes sense.
And
an easier implementation.
Yeah, thank you, Mallory. And one of the things, Lauren has walked us through a bunch of different resources. There's an RD facilitator's guide and also the new Permagarden manual that's been released. And all of these activities are outlined in there. So please look to the resources. And of course, you can message us at Scale, and we can also give you some more direction around that. Thank you.
That's what I was going. Lauren, thanks, Mallory. Mallory, feel free to email me, and we can talk separately about this as well. But with that, I think we probably need to wrap up. I really appreciate all the people who stuck around for this nice little impromptu 10 minutes of conversation. Thank you so much to all the presenters and to everyone who joined today. It's been a great session, very rich contributions from everyone, and I really appreciate that. Keep an eye out for more information through our newsletter about upcoming learning opportunities next year, and we really look forward to carrying on this conversation with everyone. Thanks again, and have a great day.